she was chosen first.
Well, hi, Flagstaff. I'm Kelly Fryer, and I'm working very hard to become your next governor. Something you might not know about me. When I graduated from college in 1983, my first kind of professional job was in a bank. I spent 2 weeks in this bank getting trained. And at the end of those 2 weeks, the bank president came to talk to those of us who had gone through this training program, and he handed us a piece of paper, and he told us that we had to sign it. And I looked at it, and the paper was an agreement not to talk about the nuclear power plant that was being built nearby. And I looked at it and I said, you mean we can't talk about the plant while we're at work, right? And he said, no, you can't. The utility that's building it is our biggest customer. You can't talk about it at all anywhere. And I said, in all of my 21-year-old fervor, I said, well, what about the First Amendment? And he fired me on the spot. I went to the office of the organization that was leading the fight to shut that nuclear power plant down, and I took a job as a field organizer, and I raised money and collected signatures all summer long, and we made sure that plant was never built. Now, yeah, you can clap. Well, no, you can't, but yes, you can. So, I tell you that story because it's a little glimpse into who I am. After our debates in Phoenix this last week, all the newspapers in Phoenix, this is what they said. Kelly Fryer's a fighter. Better believe I'm a fighter. I've spent the last 5 years, going on 6 years, as the CEO of the YWCA in Southern Arizona. Our mission is ending racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Those are things worth fighting for. Those are the things we have always fought for. And those are the things that are at risk here in our state and in our nation right now. As your governor, my pledge to you is that I will fight for those things every single day. I will put the people of our state first. Every single policy I write, every bill I sign, every budget I draft will be done through a human rights lens. We will put people first in this state. That's what I've spent the last 29 years of my career doing. As a pastor, a seminary professor, an executive director, and CEO of nonprofit organizations, I think that's the kind of governor that we need right now. Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Hi, Flagstaff. How are you? I'm David Garcia. How you doing? I am running to be governor of my home state. And I tell you that because my story is Arizona's story. I'm a fourth generation Arizonan. I am the first I'm a product of Mesa Public Schools, all through Mesa Public Schools. I'm also the first in my family to go to college. And I mention that because it is like a lot of our young people today. I recognize those struggles. I recognize also when we are sending a child to college or also sending a family to college as well, that those two things go hand in hand. For my family, it was kind of interesting because as much as they wanted the best for me, my mom and dad having gotten a high school education, my dad worked construction, my mom worked at an electronics factory, really their help in terms of helping me move on to college ended around 8th grade or so, because they just didn't have the experience. Now, it's not that they didn't care, because actually they did what every caring parent in my neighborhood did. When the salesman came to the door, they bought the Encyclopedia Britannica, and they put it on the shelf, and they said, here, read. And so from my perspective, I remember that because it's the struggle of Arizona students as well. I went to the Army when I was 17, where I learned leadership, I learned about service, I learned about integrity. I came home, went to Arizona State undergrad, and then had the privilege of getting a PhD at the University of Chicago. And it was a privilege for me to have a chance, first generation kid, to make it that far. At that point, I could have gone anywhere and contributed, but I came home again to build the state that built me. And since then, I've worked at the state legislature, so I know exactly what I'm getting into. I was the associate superintendent for the state of Arizona, so I've been in an executive position. But for the last 12 years, I have been an educator. I'm a professor. I teach teachers. And it has been a great gig. You work with interested people who are interesting. But in 2014, I was done with what the legislature was doing to public education, and so I stepped in and ran for office then, in a very tough year for Democrats. And we came this close to winning that year. And the good news is, this year, we're going to get over the top. And so, how are we going to get there? I'm very excited to tell you that in those same meetings, the Arizona Republic endorsed my campaign. And they endorsed my campaign for two reasons that are very important and are going to be the issues in November. Number one, on education, there is nobody more qualified than me to address our education issues. And number two, they endorsed our campaign on turnout. Because of every issue we talk about up here, folks, if we do not expand the Democratic base and get new people in, we're simply not going to have the numbers to win. And our campaign is built to expand that base, add to this blue wave, and turn Arizona blue. And the exciting part is, when we turn it blue, it's not going to turn back for a long, long time. Thank you.
Is anybody here ready to change Arizona? You came to the right place, because this is the face of change. Is anybody ready for a governor who believes in funding public education instead of private prisons? Is anybody ready for a governor who understands that climate change is real and human cause and must be mitigated? Is anybody ready for a governor who understands that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege? Is anybody ready for a governor who responds to the people of Arizona, not a couple of Kansas billionaires? Well, with your help, I will be the next governor of the state of Arizona. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for everything you're doing. Let me tell you a few things about me. I'm a dad. I've been a dad for almost a quarter century now. My two daughters. They both went to Arizona public schools. My parents were both public school teachers. So education is central to everything I will bring to this job and have brought to this job in the legislature for the last 12 years. I'm also a small business owner. I've run my own business since 1991. I invented a way for putting photographs on glazed ceramic tile. I do murals all over the country. I'm an artist, and I'm a legislator. I got both sides of my brain going. I think that's what we need to solve our problems. And I'm the only Democratic candidate running for office for governor who has ever served in elected office. I've served 12 years in the state legislature, 6 in the House, 6 in the Senate. I'm also the only Democratic candidate running for governor who has ever won a campaign and have won 6 in a row. You need to know how to govern in order to govern from day one, and that means working with the legislature. You need to know how to win in order to win to get there in the first place. And that's exactly what I'll do. My time in the legislature, I was the assistant minority leader in the House. I'm the assistant minority leader in the Senate. I'm the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm on the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. I was the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. I understand the policies that come before this governor and the people, the processes to be effective from day one. I'm going to be working on education. We need more funding for our schools at every level, from pre-K to all-day K, to community college, to universities, and all K-12 and K-10. We can provide the funding. When Governor Ducey says we don't have the money for our public schools, he's lying. We've chosen to give it away, and that will stop when I'm governor. We need a healthcare system that provides everyone in Arizona affordable, accessible health care. And we need an economy that works for everyone, not just those few people at the top. That's what I'll provide as your governor. I have a 12-year track record where you can look it up. You don't just have to trust that I'm saying nice things. You can look at my voting record. You can look at my fights on the floor. You can look at the successes I've had. And I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
All right, we're now moving into moderator questions. Our first question is a two-part question. Do you support the Invest in Education proposition that we expect to be on the ballot this fall? And what other funding sources for K-12 and for university education would you pursue? And this goes to Steve Farley first.
Well, thank you. I do support the Invest in Ed initiative, and I hope that passes in November. I also supported and voted for the $405 million in new money that the Red for Ed movement and those tens of thousands of teachers helped to create during budget week this week. That was this year. That was a phenomenal event. When you had tens of thousands of teachers from all over the state, they didn't walk out on their kids, they walked out for their kids. With my parents as public school teachers, I know what teachers talk about. They talk about how they make their kids' life in their classrooms better. And they love those kids in the classroom, and they will take money from their own salary to give them the supplies they need when the district doesn't do it. But they have seen the devastation wrought upon our public education system that I have seen from a parent's eye view that devastated my daughter's schools. When you have only one counselor for every 900 kids in this state, it's wrong. When you have 12-year-old computers and only the third of the computers you need, that's wrong. When you have only 25-year-old textbooks and classrooms being closed because the roofs are collapsing, and HVAC systems held together with duct tape, and teachers getting paid $50 in the country, that's wrong. We need the funding. That's why I voted for the $405 million in new money for K-12 education next year, but we need more. We've cut our schools by $1.1 billion since 2009. We have the money to pay for it. We've chosen to give it away. Invest in Ed, if that passes, will only get us up to 2008 levels. We need more. We need to fund our community colleges and our universities and our JTED system and our pre-K and our all-day K. But we give away $13.7 billion every year in corporate sales tax loopholes alone. If you buy a 3-inch pipe at the hardware store, you pay sales tax. If you buy a 4-inch pipe, you don't. The only way that makes sense is when a corporation gets a lobbyist to get themselves breaks. There are 330 other corporate sales tax loopholes just like that. 330. If we were able to close just $3 billion worth of those $13.7 billion, we can lower our sales tax rate by a full percent while increasing our education spending by $2 billion a year. Enough for across the board. That's exactly what I have from governor, and when I'm governor, and I have proven the ability to work across the aisle to get this done. Can I get the rest of my minute? Thank you. I'm choosing my rebuttal right here. Because I've been able to work across the aisle in this legislature, and I've discovered that even the Tea Party understands that special interest giveaways are flat out wrong. I had a bill last year to force review of all 331 of those corporate sales tax loopholes at least once every 10 years. Some of these haven't been reviewed in 60 years. If they could justify themselves, we keep them. If they couldn't, we get rid of them. That passed the Senate 28-2 with some of the most conservative members of the Senate voting in favor. We can actually work together to solve some of our problems. We can get these things done by coming together and solving our polarization in this country, healing our democracy, winning, and fixing our revenues so we can make our entire system less regressive and invest in ourselves for once instead of a few billionaires from out of state.
I got into this race about a year or so after my primary opponents did. And I did it for a number of reasons, not the least of which was I really didn't hear deep conversations about the kinds of things that I think really matter. You know, Democrats have a history, and I'm going to take all three. Democrats have a history of running to the middle in these kinds of races. We have a history in this state, and in this country for that matter, of being Republican light and pandering to voters that we think maybe one day will vote for us. I got into this race to tell the truth, and here's the truth. That for decades, the people who run our state, who have bought our state, have bankrupted it by giving tax cut after tax cut to the wealthiest people in our state and big corporations. That needs to turn around. So when I got into the race, nobody was daring to get specific about the fact that we need to reverse tax cuts and increase taxes on the very wealthy in our state. And I was very specific about it. I put a plan out right away. And I said, I think there are a couple things we need to do. We need to create 2 new income tax brackets for folks at the very top, for people who make more than $250,000 a year. And really what we're doing is we're just reversing the tax cut that they got back in the 1970s. Well, I was pretty excited when I saw the Invest in Ed ballot initiative come out, because that's exactly what that initiative is. So yes, I support Invest in Ed. I was Invest in Ed before there was an Invest in Ed. But that's not enough. That's not enough to raise the kind of revenue that we need to fund K through 12 education, early childhood education, community colleges, vocational technical training. And so I'm looking at every single tax break that the wealthiest Arizonans have gotten over the last 40 years, and I say, let's turn them around. Because I'll tell you what, your taxes went up, my taxes went up, our property taxes went up, our sales taxes went up, while they were cutting the capital gains tax for the wealthiest people in our state. So we need to reverse the capital gains tax cut. We need to really look, I think, at creating a state property tax for folks that have very expensive homes. And we need to be about the business of funding our state government. But we can't do it unless we have a structural change. And so we're going to have to reverse the big, gorilla in the room. We're going to have to reverse Prop 108. Prop 108 is what created the rule that says the only way the state legislature can raise taxes is if we have a 2/3 vote in the state legislature. We can cut with a 50% vote. You see, they've stacked the deck against us. So we need a leader who understands the structure and can work with people in our state to create structural change. Because there are folks who are running our government right now who want to sell it
All
off.
right, thank
We
you.
need
Time's
to
up.
take it back. Oh, that does say stop.
Time's up. Thank you.
Educators, education allies, parents, everyone who supported Dread for Ed, thank you very much. You did something amazing. You put this issue at the front of our agenda, and it's so important that you did. But I've been in education policy for over 20 years, and there are a couple things I know from being there. Number one, the legislature, folks will look at the condition we're in education, and they will say it's a lack of leadership, and that is simply not true. This is a specific plan. The plan is to cut education to the bone, criticize it for not improving, and then turn to privatization. That is not a lack of leadership, that is intentional. And I've always felt that the only way to fight back on that was educators needed to take the issue into their own hands, and they did, 50,000 strong, and I am very, very proud of every single one of our educators who did that. And from the very beginning, day one, I have been behind Invest in Ed. I'm also proud to say that those educators through the Arizona Education Association has endorsed our campaign as well. And one of the major reasons is because for them, folks can stand up and say that they're going to be the next education governor. But for the educators out there, for the first time in a long time, you're going to have a governor who is an educator. And that's a very different view of the world. And so I stand behind Invest in Ed. Not only that, our teams, which by the way, we have some amazing teams, including up here in Flagstaff, and I see some of our volunteers out there, thank you. We were walking with teachers to get it on the ballot, helping out, sweating, not just waiting for it to get on, but doing our part to make sure that happened. Lastly, teachers out there, understand something else as well. I am never going to thank you for your service, because teaching should not be service. Teaching is a profession, and we need to treat it like a profession. My commitment as governor is to treat teachers like professionals, and it's 3 things. It is pay them like professionals so that they can raise a classroom and raise a family and stay in the classroom, number 1. Number 2, it is letting you teach again, so we're going to peel back our fascination with standardized testing. And number 3, it is making sure you are at the table to develop education policy, which is not the case today. That is simply not happening. I am committed to those things without question. So how are we going to fund it? Starting with Invest in Ed, that's a great start. certainly behind it. We'll continue to work there. But second, we need to close tax credits in Arizona, folks, starting with private school vouchers. We need to close private school vouchers so that public money continues to go back into our public schools. Our legislature isn't taking this seriously. As long as they allow public money to exit to private schools, at the same time, we stay at the bottom in public school funding. Number three, we do need to close corporate loopholes. You're hearing that a lot up here. But one thing you need to also understand about our campaign, is that 2 or 3? 3, all right, is corporate loopholes get there through lobbyists, and our campaign is taking $0 from lobbyists so that we can go down there and serve the people of Arizona. Thanks.
What specific proposals do you have to make sure we have enough energy to support our growing population and economy while not destroying our environment? And the first answer will come from David Garcia.
That's a very good question. So, from my perspective, I am behind also the Clean Energy and Healthy Arizona Act as well. It is a 50% renewable for Arizona. It makes a lot of sense, folks. The general public doesn't understand why we're not doing more in solar. Arizona needs to be a solar superpower. Phoenix gets almost 300 days of sunshine. It makes complete sense. It is a renewable source. It is better for our environment without question. In addition, it's an economic driver as well. We've got the ability in Arizona to move toward a solar economy, which would be beneficial. And I think that starting with that initiative, which is also going to be on the ballot, is a great start to moving us toward this end. With respect to the environment, I said I'm from here, born and raised, and I can't tell you how happy it makes me to drive up to northern Arizona through a file of pine trees on either side of the road. And it is my commitment as governor to make sure that those pine trees in our beautiful Arizona environment, particularly up here, is going to be here not just for our generation, but for my daughter's generation and for generations to come. And so my commitment will always be to make sure we are not selling out short-term gain for long-term impact in Arizona. Our Native American populations have taken a 7-generation view of the decisions they make about the environment, and I believe we need to take a similar approach. Making sure we're making tough decisions today, making sure we're doing everything we can to do our part, making sure we have exhausted every other possibility before we turn to harming the environment in any single way, any way. And it is only then that we're going to not only take from Arizona, which we've got to stop doing, but we've got to start taking care of Arizona as well. Thank you.
My first act as governor will be to sign an executive order to put Arizona right back in the Paris Climate Change Accords as a state. This is a crisis, and certainly people who live up here in the North Country know that. When you have global warming to the extent that bark beetles are now overwintering and weakening our forests, causing the risk of catastrophic forest fires and wildland fires, we've got a major risk here. It's affecting our water supply. It's affecting the heat. Sky Harbor closed down last summer at 116 degrees because it was too hot for the planes to fly. And climate scientists are saying in 10 to 20 years, you're going to look at 130 degrees on a regular basis in Phoenix. Can we stand our state's biggest port shutting down for a month and a half every summer? The fact is, we have solutions to not just mitigate this, but to help us benefit as a state from it. Why are we running this country on West Virginia coal or Texas oil? We ought to be powering this nation on Arizona sunshine. We are exactly where Texas was with oil in the 20s. Why aren't we making money off of California? Making money off of the rest of the state? We have our greatest natural resource right here, together with our universities, and what they have discovered in terms of 24/7 base load on battery power, of more efficient solar panels and solar generations. We have the transmission infrastructure. We could be taking this generation of clean solar power and charging a premium to California, who has a 50% renewable standard right now, and using it to invest in ourselves. We could be solving our long-term climate change problems and make money so we can invest in ourselves at every level. And that's exactly what we'll do as governor. I want to follow the model of Janet Napolitano when she had a Western climate change compact with other states in the West who have the same amount at stake, and work it so we can actually have the entire Western United States reducing climate change by working together with folks. We can cooperate and we can save our planet and we can make money off at the same time. What's wrong with that?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What specific proposals do you have to make sure we have enough energy to support our growing population and economy while not destroying our environment?
Thank you. So I've been traveling all around the state of Arizona since February 1st. I've been 28, almost 29,000 miles around the state. I've been talking to thousands of people around our state and working with some of the best experts in our state, folks that are working in our state capitol right now. And what I've been doing with all the information that I've been learning is writing a plan. I have a plan for my first 100 days. So I'm going to be sharing things from that plan with you as we go tonight. Here are the 3 things I'm going to do in answer to that question about energy. Number 1, I'm going to sign an executive order that creates a non-geographic 2030 district made up of all of the state buildings in Arizona. A 2030 district, it's a national movement. And what a 2030 district is it's a geographic location, and every building inside that location agrees to cut carbon emissions in half and water use in half by 2030. So I'm going to create a 2030 district so we get really serious about at least our state buildings. Number 2, I'm going to work to include the angel investor tax credit in the state budget. The angel investor tax credit would allow you to invest, and people with a lot more money than you, to invest in high-tech companies. And we have energy entrepreneurs at work in our state that really just need capital. And so we're going to encourage their work. Number 3, I'm going to, in my 15-county economic development plan, focus on economic development in all 15 counties of our state, and we're going to prioritize renewable energy. I met a scientist here in Flagstaff at the very beginning of my campaign. He works here at NAU. And he told me that on the edge of town, there's a pocket of geothermal energy. We can get to that pocket by drilling down through an abandoned mine. So we're not even going to mess up the environment. The cost of this is approximately $2 million. And he said, you know, I'm a scientist, so I'm not going to tell you what I think we could do with that pocket of geothermal energy. I'm going to tell you what I know we can do. We can power 100,000 homes. I said, is anybody in the state of Arizona talking to you about this? He said, they don't want to hear from us. That will change when I'm governor, and I have a plan to make it happen. Thank you.
All right, our next question. Arizona's unemployment rate remains higher than the national average, and underemployment is among the worst in the country. What do you think can be done to increase economic opportunity for Arizonans? And how, as governor, will you work to bring jobs to the state that will address this unemployment and this underemployment problem? And the first question goes to Kelly Fryer.
Thank you. So at the heart of my 15-county economic development plan are a couple of things. One, we need to stop investing our dollars in big companies that are coming from out of state and bringing low-paying jobs, mostly in Maricopa County. I don't know if you know this, but the Arizona Commerce Authority invests like hundreds of millions of dollars every year to build hotels in downtown Phoenix and Tempe. Our money should be invested in locally owned small businesses here in Arizona and those businesses that are paying a living wage. So the number one thing I'm going to do is to work with the Arizona Commerce Authority to shift our investment. These are our dollars. These are our dollars. Right now, a company that comes in from out of state, we're giving them tax credits for every job they create that pays. Take a wild guess. How much do they have to pay to get a tax credit? $38,000. That's not a living wage job. Is that a living wage job here in Flagstaff? No, you can hardly pay your rent on that kind of wage. So that's the number one thing that we need to do, is we need to be reinvesting our dollars through the Arizona Commerce Authority into locally owned small businesses and into those that are paying a living wage. Number two, I'm going to be working with economic development committees and chambers and local municipalities all across our state to help these small towns and rural communities diversify their economies. So many of these communities are completely dependent on tourism or mining. One industry after, and when that slows down or goes away, what happens to those communities? We need to be focusing on diversification in our economic development. Am I too geeky? I'm sorry if that's the case. Third, I'm going to create a wage board in Arizona. I'm going to bring representatives from labor and business together, and we're going to look at the prevailing wage in every major industry sector in our region. We'll set that wage, and we will prioritize and incentivize businesses across Arizona that pay that wage. That's a way to raise wages all across our state without getting into arguments about the minimum wage, which tends to pit small business owners against the poor people who work for them. It's a very complicated issue, right? I know you're dealing with that here in Flagstaff. So those are three very concrete things that I plan to do in order to increase economic development and raise wages and create better jobs in Arizona. And by the way, you can see all this stuff, all my plans, on my website at fryerforarizona.com. Thank you.
David Garcia.
The path to high-wage jobs, the path to economic investment, folks, is education. My discussion around education is not just about K-12. It is about investing in education all the way through the university level. Because the future is about training and educating so that you have folks who are ready to develop tomorrow's technology, solve tomorrow's problem. And if you look at development, particularly in the western United States, you're going to see that Arizona, despite some positive economic indicators, continues to trail a lot of our western states. And the number one reason we continue to trail them, a lack of investment in education. And for me, this idea of attracting businesses and even people from outside of Arizona, I find it's problematic because when we talk about that, we're forgetting to invest in the people in Arizona. The students and the young entrepreneurs in this state who are ready to go out and do some amazing work. And so from my perspective, my focus on education includes a tie to economic development. Look, I pay attention when I see a new tech company coming in, particularly to the Valley, because that's where I get most of my news. More often than not, almost always, they're tied to Arizona State University. Why? Because that's where the human capital is. The future is about developing human capital. And so our plan is to focus on investing in higher education, starting with the community colleges. I am in favor of universal community colleges in Arizona, folks, and I'm in favor of universal community college for a number of reasons. One, the state has zeroed out our support for community colleges. That is a very short-sighted decision. But in addition, our young people, most of our young people start their journey, higher education journey, at the community colleges. And third, our community colleges continue to be a place to develop high-tech jobs in manufacturing or solar or healthcare or police and fire science. And particularly in rural Arizona, the community colleges can be a place to develop whole new economies. You can look at Yavapai College, for example, and their wine program that goes from the vine to the bottle, and the impact it's had up there. In addition, we need to get back, as a state, to our goal, our constitutional requirement, that universities be as nearly free as possible. Yes, and I'll tell you why. Our young people can't leave and get started. They can't join, they can't participate in the economy, buy a house, start a business. And then lastly, our focus is going to be on businesses starting, building, and staying in Arizona. Yes, we'll continue to try to attract businesses as we can and corporations, but our focus will be on those businesses that are ready to start here, give them incentive to do that, to build, to grow roots here in Arizona, because it is those businesses that can.
All right, time's up. Thank you. Steve Harley.
First thing I want to say is I think it's time we had a governor who understands that he's a governor of the entire state, not just Maricopa County. Economic development is one of those areas in which Maricopa County has gotten everything. In fact, in Doug Ducey's first year and a half, the Arizona Commerce Commission had no one from outside of Maricopa County on the commission. That's outrageous. This is a state with a lot of different needs and a lot of different resources, and we ought to be taking advantage of them all and making sure that all the needs are met everywhere. And economic development is one of the key things. One of the ways you develop your economy is by investing in transportation infrastructure. Those of you who have driven on I-40 or I-17 recently understand that our rural areas have not gotten the investment that they need to. And part of that is because this governor and this legislative majority have been continuing what's called a HERF shift, shifting our gas tax money that's supposed to be spent on transportation infrastructure to other things like corporate tax cuts. It's wrong. And that's why this last year I worked across the aisle with Senator Bob Worsley of Mesa, a Republican, and we kept the Democratic caucus together, and we passed a bill which will end the HERF shift as of next year forever. So we'll finally be able to invest in transportation infrastructure. And every $1 billion you spend on transportation is 19,000 new jobs. So that's economic development in the construction and economic development in the quality of life and the ability for companies to have access to markets and people have the access to work. So that's key. We also got to invest in our education system. That is the underlying foundation of everything we do this century. And we cannot grow our economy without it. There was an interesting article in the Phoenix Business Journal a couple summers ago, which was testing that theory that Governor Ducey says, which is that you need a favorable business climate, tax climate, in order to attract business here. Well, we've cut those business corporate taxes repeatedly over and over again at our own expense. There were 2 companies considering coming to Arizona with 3,000 jobs. They decided not to come here, so the reporter did an exit interview and asked them, why didn't you come here? And they said, oh, we never even looked at the business tax climate. That was way down our spreadsheet. The 2 hurdles you did not clear were a sustainably trained workforce and a long-term commitment to your public education system. And they left. There's a reason Amazon decided not even to consider Arizona for a second headquarters. There's a reason why Intel and Chandler has said publicly they wouldn't be here now if they didn't have so much stranded capital. If we don't invest in our education system at every level, including our community college system, which should be a platform for a lifetime of training and retraining when an industry disappears, and we need to be able to have a future for people who've lost their careers. And we need our university system to be able to invent the industries of the future so we can grow our own instead of bribing sketchy companies to come here from elsewhere like Governor Ducey does with Uber self-driving cars and Theranos, which have literally put our lives in danger.
Next question. We seem to be struggling in a culture of corruption in Washington, and Arizona has been named as one of the most corrupt states in the country. What can you, as governor, do about this problem? And the first question goes to Steve Farley.
This is part of a core of why I'm running for governor. 12 years in the legislature, that puts some fire in your belly. You see what's happening to our state government, and you see how much better it could be done. This is a governor right now who is not governing for us. He's governing for a couple of out-of-state billionaires and their friends. They just want their taxes lowered. They don't care about our quality of life. And what happens when you don't actually believe that government could be an honorable service that helps people, when you don't honestly believe in public service and the honor that goes with that, then you create a government that is not honorable. You create a government in which you are hiring people in charge of the departments of state who don't actually believe in the mission of their own departments. What happens when you don't believe that actually we could create a better quality of life for people in this state through better government, more efficient government, more responsive government? Then you do what Doug Ducey did last year, when his best offer at that time was 0.4% raises for public school teachers. At the same time as he was giving his own political appointees and inner circle 20% raises, plus promotions, plus bonuses. Well, I'll tell you, the people who work for my administration will not be working for money and power. They'll be working for the honor of serving the public and doing a great job to carry out the mission of their department. When Governor Ducey first came into office, he decided the Department of Revenue to fire 150 corporate tax auditors. These are the people who go after tax cheats. They cost a little bit of money in salary, but they bring in a net $1.5 million each in revenues to the state. Money that could go to invest in our public schools, to our roads, to our healthcare system. Why would you fire 150 of them? Because you believe, like Grover Norquist, that you should shrink government to the size where it should be drowned in the bathtub. Not because you believe the government can be a force for good in people's lives. We can do better. This governor had 6 department heads leave under a cloud in his first 3.5 years of his term. There was a guy in charge of DES, the Department of Economic Security, who Governor Ducey said, I wish I could clone him, 3 weeks before he was fired. He was fired for buying drinks for his staff on the job to celebrate how many people he fired out. And then after he was fired, it was discovered that he had a private militia in the basement of DES, the Department of Economic Security, with 80,000 rounds of ammunition bought with taxpayer money and uniforms he had designed with happy faces on the back. Yeah, happy faces. You can't make this stuff up. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you don't believe in the people of Arizona and how you can help serve them. When I'm governor, I and my administration and everyone I hire will be about serving the people of Arizona. Thank you.
So this is one question that you can start to look at right now. And the reason I say that is because let's stop and take a second and ask ourselves, how does corruption get there in the first place? Any idea how corruption gets there in the first place? It gets there right, well, yeah. Good point. It gets there right now, folks. One of my favorite sayings is how you get there matters. And it's how you get there, how you get to elected office, that is going to determine what you can do when you get there. See, corruption happens at this point when campaigns need money and lobbyists show up with that money. And now they're not there for the best interest of Arizona. They're there to get their best interest from their clients. And so what happens is politicians or prospective politicians go out and take lobbyist dollars. And then they win. Now you all go back to work after this, right? You go back to your lives again. But you know what lobbyists do? They sit there and wait. They sit and wait outside your office to get the transaction back that they gave you money for. They sit outside your office on behalf of their clients. And so that is the reason why, having seen this a number of times at the legislature, when I was working at the legislature, there were legislators who had some good ideas, trying to look out for the best interest of Arizona, but they couldn't do it because lobbyists would walk in and they were the ones that had the purse strings. And so I mention that because I want to say it again and have you understand that I'm putting my money where my mouth is here, and that is our campaign is taking $0 from lobbyists. Why? So that when I am governor, you come down the elevator, and and those dark suits are out there waiting, I can walk right past every single one of them, not owe them a thing, and come out and serve the people of Arizona. It makes fundraising harder, by the way, because they do come with dollars. But one of the things that's exciting about our campaign is the way to get over this is you need people. You need people power to join you. And I'm very excited to tell you that we're getting it done through individual donations from Arizonans and individuals that are looking to have an impact. Our average donation, $45. $45. Doug Ducey's, $1,800. But we have a lot more of them, folks. And the reason that it's important, because when you win that way, when you win with people power, then you can go out and serve the people. So take a look at the campaigns. Take a look at who is taking this pledge. Take a look at who is at this point in the campaign making it clear that they're not going to give up, they're not going to give in to corruptive forces, so that when we win, you can be rest assured that they're going to say, I'm going to say, or do what I say I'm going to do, and that is serve the people of Arizona. Thank you.
So you won't be surprised to know I have a plan for this too. I have a list of people who will be fired my first week in office, starting with Chuck Ryan, who's the head of the Department of Corrections, who is right now in contempt of court and is a horrible man. Actually, the governor has a lot of power over who makes the decisions that impact your life. Every board and commission of this state, just about, those folks are appointed by the governor. And what I want to tell you is that I have a set of clear guiding principles that I'm going to be requiring of the people who work in my administration. Number one, people come first, not your rich buddies. Number two, everyone wins. This is not a zero-sum game. Somebody doesn't have to lose for somebody else to win. We're going to look for solutions that make sense for all of us. And three, we're going to be bold and fearless about the solutions that we look for to solve the problems that we face in our state. And I'm going to make sure that every single board and commission in my administration and my leadership team is the most diverse, effective, committed, dedicated team the state's ever seen. I'm making a commitment that we won't just have Native Americans serving on the commission that works on Native American issues. We're going to have Native Americans on all the boards and commissions in this state. We're going to make sure that we have the best people. Right now, the group that is responsible for the standards and training for police officers in this state, there isn't a single woman on that group. There's only one person of color. I think what we need is a government that reflects the people. So, all that being said, I'm with Dave. I think that the way we're running our campaigns are an indicator of the kind of government that we'll lead. Between them, my opponents have spent almost $1.5 million on this campaign so far. I've spent $150,000. You know why? Because it's obscene. And because it puts, when you have to take and raise that much money to get your message out, it puts you in the pockets not just of corporate donors, but big donors across the state and across the country. I'm not jetting around the country raising money from big billionaires in LA. I got in my Prius on February 1st, and I drove 28,000 miles. And everything I do is transparent. Tonight I wanted to live stream this debate so that folks across the state could see it. That wasn't approved. I even live stream my private house parties. And I take questions from hundreds of people across the state. Because I think that we need and deserve a governor and a government that is ours. Politics is broken government. Politics has become about money and power and influence. And it's become about who can buy that power and influence. I'm running this campaign the same way I'll run this state. Transparent and honest.
Next question. Comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level has been elusive since Ronald Reagan did it in the 80s. Is there anything you as governor could do to alleviate the negative impacts of federal immigration policy on Arizona and on our people? Kelly Fryer first, please.
So as the CEO of the YWCA in Southern Arizona, where we serve 50,000 people a year on our campuses, and thousands of them are women, and most of them are immigrants. So I've been working hand in hand and side by side with immigrant women and families for years here in Arizona. And what is happening in our country right now, and what is happening on our border, this goes beyond politics. We have now reached a point where we are facing a moral crisis. And we have to do something about that. So there are some things that I can do as governor. Number one, I'm going to pull the National Guard's troops that have been deployed down there off the border and send them home. Number two, I am going to ban state law enforcement from collaborating with federal immigration agents until we have a system that prioritizes human rights and basic human dignity. We have to stop the collaboration in the state. I'm going to end contracts with every private prison and detention center that the state of Arizona has. And I'm going to make sure as governor, even those that are contracted by the federal government, they're on my property, they're licensed by this state, they're going to be nice. I am going to be in those centers ensuring that the people, and especially the children, are being treated with the utmost care and love. You do not want to mess with a mom. I'm also going to do some things internally here that make life easier for our immigrant neighbors and dreamers. I'm going to sign an executive order about immigration that includes a number of platforms, one of which is we're going to make driver's licenses in this state accessible to everyone who can prove residency. Do you know what that means? Right now you have to show your passport. You don't have to do that in all the states across this country. All you have to do is show up with a water bill. We're going to make life better for our immigrant neighbors. But I think that the thing I can do most of all is to begin changing the narrative and the conversation in our state. If you have not seen the debates from last week, they're on azpbs.org. I encourage you to go and watch them, because not only did I challenge my opponents, I challenged the moderators. Because they wanted to know what I was going to do about border security. And you know what I told them? I'm not going to have that conversation. I reject that line of questioning. Because I'll tell you what, crime on our border is not the problem. The problem is that there are children in detention centers on our watch being raped by people on our payroll. This is a moral outrage, and it will stop when Pastor Kelly becomes the governor of Arizona.
First thing I want to be clear on is that Dreamers will not be deported from Arizona on my watch. The Dreamers are the foundation of our future as an economy and a society. These are the folks who have worked the hardest, who have succeeded, who have served our country, who have been serving in our universities. They are the foundation of our economy. They cannot be taken away from us. That is an infringement of our sovereignty as a state. Now, I also want to talk about the latest happenings, where the President of the United States has been taking the focus away from border security, of actual drug cartel issues on the border, and instead putting resources into separating families of migrants who are running from terror and seeking asylum in this country. It is absolutely wrong. We must not be separating children from their parents. And it's continuing. Even though children aren't being separated from their moms right now, if a mom and a dad and a kid comes over, we're still separating the dad from the family and putting that dad in Eloy in many cases. and then having the mom and the child go to their final location while they await their asylum. That is also wrong. Families must stay together. That is absolutely clear. And one of the things that has been most outrageous to me, and I've been taking a lead on this, is that in Arizona, and particularly in Tucson and Phoenix, we have had military contractors setting up private prisons for children without actually gaining state licensing. There's a company called MVM that's been particularly egregious about this in the Phoenix area, which is a military contractor that just recently had its license, its contract renewed by the federal government for $600 million a year to supposedly transport kids. But an investigative reporter busted them for finding them in office buildings, keeping kids for an unspecified number of days, with kids bathing in sinks in public restrooms without any licensing from the state, even though state statute says you need to have health licensing and regular inspections. And when they were discovered, I had a press conference there with a number of my colleagues in front of the office building where they were discovered. They had gone with hours before. And I said at that press conference, well, where are they going to next? Because we got to shut down this entire company and not allow them to do business in Arizona. Well, 10 days later, they popped up in another office block. And I had another press conference. And both times, within 3 hours of my press conference being broadcast, finally Doug Ducey told the health inspectors to go out there after the company had already left. We need to not just go after the individual places where they're keeping these kids and play whack-a-mole. We got to go after the original company and ban them from doing business in the state of Arizona, as our state law already says.
This is a huge question. In fact, it's really 3 questions that we should ask here. Let's start off with changing the narrative. Folks, the border has always been an asset to Arizona and not a liability. We continue to say that. It's always been an asset. Mexico's our largest trading partner, for example. Mexico has continued to have a strong relationship with Arizona from a labor perspective. Mexico has contributed so much from a cultural and language perspective. And we need a governor who is going to change that narrative. Maybe go to Mexico and speak in Spanish, by the way, in native language, and be that voice and that brand new leadership with respect to the border. But the second issue is the immigration issue. You heard it up here, and I'm glad, and I'm sure I'd be surprised if anybody in here is not on the same page that this is a human rights issue. That the separation of children from their families is not making our country any safer. It is inhumane. In fact, when I found out that there were 10 cities being built outside of El Paso, I went with my 11-year-old daughter on Father's Day. We took a ride, we took a flight to El Paso, to Tornillo, to witness the 10 cities for ourselves. And I did it because we have a very ugly history of 10 cities in Arizona particularly. And the thought of children being housed in 10 cities was too much. And so we both went out there and led a march with Beto O'Rourke and Joe Kennedy. By the way, I was very proud of my 11-year-old daughter, who told me her knees were shaking, but she stood firm. And she told my wife on the phone afterwards that she was screaming as loud as she could so that the kids inside could hear us, so that they knew they had not been abandoned. And it's that kind of spirit we need to take. Likewise, for our dreamers out there, understand I believe you are as American as I am, and I look forward to giving you every opportunity to study and contribute to the only country you have ever known. I'm very proud to have the support of Lucha, an organization with a number of undocumented students who work with them, because they know that I'm going to be committed to our dreamers here in Arizona, some of them on our staff as well. But last is the politics of this. Folks, this is the Republican dog whistle issue. This is the issue they drag out to divide our communities and for fear-mongering. It's the reason why, some of you have probably seen the $1 million in attack ads that have been put out on me already on this issue of immigration. They made 2 ads only, one for me and one for Kelly. They have run 99% of those ads on me. And this is not about immigration. This is about Doug Ducey and the Republican Governors Association distracting the public from the issues that matter, like corruption and public education. And it's about them understanding that I am the campaign and the candidate they don't want to see in November, which is why they're putting so much time and energy at this early of the stage to try to have an impact. And it's all around immigration. We've got to take a narrative here that is going to be different and that's going to remind Arizonans that the border, as I said, is an asset.
All right, the time's up. Thank you.
Invite everyone to just stand up in your place and stretch for a minute, and then we'll move to audience questions.
Who are you photographing?
Oh, just the debate.
Other people?
Yeah, I just like doing events like that.